Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Project Stargate. I'm your host, Mark Brenner. Today we have Missing Time with Niara Isley. Niara Isley has a website, Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light.com. She's also the author of the lightly named book. She has another website also called Encounters with Healing. I look forward to hearing about that. Um, Niara is a Air Force veteran. She's had a lifetime of paranormal and other very strange and bizarre experiences through her life, including 3 months of missing time, which we'll get into in our second segment a little bit. Niara, thank you so much for being with me today on Project Stargate, and I'm very honored to have you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. To start out with, Niara, just to give the listeners a little background, I've been interested in your story for ever since I first heard you on another talk show many years ago, and I was totally riveted and even in a way I was touched by it because your bravery, I can feel your energy coming through this podcast. Like you have so much positive energy, and how do you do it? How do you maintain these positive vibes all the time with everything that's happened?
Well, uh, I guess it's just when I made the decision to go public, one of the key reasons was this realization came to me that by being silent, I was allowing abuse that I went through to go on for others. I'm not going through it anymore, and so at that point, it kind of became a passion for me to share my story. And I'm not like the usual people out there that have a book and they're always walking around waving and saying, "Hey, it's me. I'm famous. I have a book. Or buy my book." Do all this stuff. I mean, I'm kind of really an introvert, and if I have something to say, I say it. And if I don't have anything to say, a long dry spell can go by where my friends and followers don't hear from me, especially on Facebook. But I try to say things, and once you do something like this, it's kind of like in for a penny and in for a pound. You have to follow through. And I've really had some struggles this past couple years with wanting to pull out of the UFO field altogether, because certain individuals have taken the UFO field and turned it into an entertainment enterprise instead of a serious research forum where all kinds of people can come and present their experiences or their research findings. And I really have a problem with that because this is a really serious field and we deal with serious things. And there's some out there that say all ETs are good and none of them would do us any harm. And I do not believe that for 1 second. I think that there are good ones out there and bad ones, just like we have good
Hmm.
and bad people here.
Right.
I tend to think on the positive side that there are more benevolent good ETs than bad ones. And the reason for that is if they're running craft that run on 0 point energy, um, and they had to develop that energy source from the beginning to bringing it into using it for flight and other, and maybe powering their civilizations on their planet, then they had to there's spiritual steps that have to happen to get to that point. And a really good example, and I'm not sure, I think there's an audio version of this on Carrie Cassidy's website. I don't know if the video is still there, but there was one done years ago where she did an interview with Ralph Ring. And Ralph Ring and Otis Carr, they were always observing nature and looking at how things happened in nature, and out of that observation and out of their feeling inside that everything was interconnected, they came up with 0 point energy, and they actually built a terrestrial based flying saucer and took it on one flight before the government came in and shut them down. The
Wow.
government came in, shut them down, and disbanded their working group, and they were not supposed to ever talk to each other again. But then Ralph Ring did the interview with Carrie Cassidy, and it really, you just feel like you see the mindset of people that come up with something like 0 point energy, because it's really about discovering the energy potential that is sitting in the air around us. You know, all the atoms are spinning a certain way, and they're creating energies, and all you do is you just tap into that energy field, kind of like Tesla. And look at the kind of man Tesla was. Was he a dark government type? Absolutely no, not. He brought this energy forward, and he thought it was really going to be just a huge boon for mankind, and it would help everybody so much. And then J.P. Morgan shut him down. You know, he says, I can't use this because I can't slap a meter on it and charge people money for it.
Right.
And so there's the mindset of people that come up with this, and then there's the mindset of people that want the control. And I always say in my book that the United States of America has been a poster child for why you do not give advanced technology to a backward culture, because all they can think to do with it is weaponize it and use it for power and control. So that's why I think the majority of ETs out there that have developed this energy from its inception are beneficial. I could be wrong about this. You know, I don't have any attachment to being right, but I tend to think that we have more good civilizations out there that are using this technology for the right reasons, and lesser of the negative ones that are using it for bad intent, like directed weapons and laser beams that kill and destroy, and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of things, particle beam weapons, you know, and everything like that. I'm sure the good ETs have developed that too out of their own defense. But when a civilization takes something like 0 point or over unity energy and starts developing it to weaponize it and so on and so forth, then that's the negative slant. And a lot of people pointed that out when there was all those fires in California a year or two ago. They showed houses burnt to a crisp and the surrounding vegetation untouched. And that just, if that was just a regular fire that came through, it wouldn't be that way. Everything would be burnt.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that you took that in the direction you did, because I'm actually kind of I don't want to say a whole lot about it right now. In the future, I'm going to kind of talk about this in detail, but I actually am working on a theory with one of my partners regarding PK and a possible connection to the type of 0 point energy you're talking about that UFOs seem to utilize. That's something I definitely want to tell you about in detail sometime in the future. Maybe we can talk about it or something. Maybe we can come back sometime and talk about it. But
Well, there's a movie called Celestine Prophecy where they were teaching people about energy fields around themselves and plants and everything. And they said sometimes that if you could just take your fingers and move them back and forth and soften your vision at the, you know, soften your vision of your fingers, so you're kind of not looking at them directly, but you're just kind of looking at them peripherally, sort of, and you're in a darkened room, you can see the energy between the fingertips. And it's probably that energy that we have naturally that we can learn to manipulate that probably plays into the PK.
yeah, absolutely. Now, as far as you didn't just get into this field or these fields of research because you're just fascinated by it. You are actually a captive audience since you were, as long as you can remember, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, my dad was the first one that introduced me to the field, to the thought of UFOs, because he had read Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. He read all 3 of his books, and then he handed them over to me. He said, this is really fascinating stuff. Years later, from a psychic, I found out that my dad was an abductee in childhood. And it explained a lot of stuff about his alcoholism, that maybe he was staying out late at night at bars where people were around to avoid himself getting picked up. And
That's sad.
that was my first, yeah, I wish he was alive today, the talks he and I would have. Oh my God.
I can imagine. My
Yeah,
God, I can imagine.
yeah.
Bless his
So,
heart.
yeah. And so after that, I didn't think about it. I was into metaphysics a lot, you know, and I went through catechism with the Lutheran Church, hoping some great mystery would be revealed there that would make it worthwhile to continue being a Lutheran. It didn't happen. And I thought, Well, God gave me this beautiful mind, and He didn't put a bunch of fences around it and tell me not to look outside the fences.
Sure.
So I went in and I looked at all kinds of things. Looked at reincarnation, which I believe was a doctrine in the Bible before the Council of Nicaea took it out because they thought maybe people would behave better if they had only one lifetime to spend. So I don't know if that conflicts with your belief. I'm sorry if it does. I'm sorry,
No,
but
not at all. It's I'm an open-minded Christian, so
okay.
that isn't not at all. I
Yeah,
find that I'm becoming a little bit more open to the idea of that. I'm still not really sure where on which side of the fence I fall on, but it's something that I have to keep an open mind about because there is some circumstantial evidence that points towards that as a
right.
possibility.
Well,
Um,
rest assured, I may not be an ordinary Christian, but I believe in God. Maybe not the guy on the throne kind of belief, but I believe in a God that's out there that's benevolent, that loves us all, and
sure,
to wants us to discover our destiny and our way back to Him.
yeah,
And
that,
I have a picture of Jesus on a magnet on my refrigerator. I look at him every day.
yeah,
And every all the best Christian values live in me, live in my heart.
I can tell. It
Yeah.
definitely shows, Niara. I one thing I wanna kind of, if as much as you feel comfortable getting into, of course.
Sure.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about, at least about things that happened to you? You started noticing in your childhood, just as far as you feel comfortable talking. Some of the stuff's kind of dark and deep.
Yeah.
Just whatever you feel comfortable talking about. I'd love to share this story with your listeners. I think it's important.
Sure. Okay. Well, it started when I was just a little girl, and I didn't really realize what was going on until later on because the memories would stay there. The first
Hmm.
memory of I was asleep at night in my house, and parents were asleep, and I had this dream where my sister had taken me out after dark, and she left me under a street lamp on the street where the light was coming down from the street lamp on the street. And in a kind of a surreal way, every place where there was not street lamp light shining on the sidewalk, it was pitch black outside of that light. Couldn't see a thing outside of it. And she says, I want you to wait here under this light until I come back and get you. And so I stood there under the light with all this black on the outside where the light was touching, and I was getting more and more scared because I was really like about 4 years old when this happened. So I'm like getting more and more scared and more and more scared and more and more scared. And she didn't come back, and she didn't come back, and she didn't come back. And I started screaming in the dream. And of course, I was screaming for real in my bed at home too. And and my mom came in and said, shh, 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 you're going to wake up your dad. You're going to wake up your dad, which we didn't want to wake up dad because of his alcohol problems. So
Right.
I think he had PTSD from World War II,
Oh.
but it was never talked about and stuff like that. People say I make too many excuses for my dad, but you know,
They
I
haven't lived. Who are they to make a judgment? Because
right,
they didn't live it. Being a veteran myself, you don't
yeah,
know what it's like until you actually go into, just not, even if you don't go into combat. Serving in the military can be very traumatic in many ways,
yeah,
which we'll talk about later. But go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
So anyway, she was saying, "Don't wake up your dad" and everything, and so I was quiet. I didn't even tell her what I was dreaming. I just tried to go back to sleep, and that kind of scenario happened in my childhood.
Hmm.
Probably a lot through childhood. And I just kept quiet about it. If I remembered anything, I just kept quiet about it because, I didn't think my parents really wanted to hear about it after my experience with my mom. And
Did
not
you
to
did you
not
have this thought that maybe this is like something that every kid goes through, like it's something nor bizarre, but like you maybe something that you were thinking that maybe your friends at school and your cousins and your sister your siblings, is this something you thought that is kind of like normal for everybody? Because I did.
um, no, I didn't really think that. I kind of felt isolated with it. And I was a different sort of kid anyway. I've been a spiritual person since birth. And when I was going to Sunday school, I was always looking for answers to some of my meaning of life questions. And I didn't really find them. And so I remember one time when I was a little girl just sitting outside in the backyard looking around at nature, I said, you know, someday I want to know the really real truth about God
Yes.
and my place in the universe. And I want to know the really real truth about it all. And I think that statement that I made from, you know, a really passionate place inside myself about really wanting to know the underlying truths, you know, I think it led me to where I am today. I really do.
Awesome.
Sometimes there's that pivotal moment when you make a statement like that and you want it so much and you can feel the desire in your heart to want that knowledge so much. It just sets things in motion in your life and takes you where it will so that you can have a chance to find out those things.
So just setting the scene here just for a moment. So
Sure.
you're woken up in the middle of the night. Is
Mm-hmm.
it your sister came to you, correct? Didn't your or what you thought was your sister?
She never came back to get me out from under that light. I just woke up screaming and then scared. And like I said, I think those experiences went on, but I didn't really think about them during the day much. That dream where I woke up screaming was the only thing where I really remembered. Now, when I had hypnosis with Bud Hopkins in 1994, we went into some of those childhood dream memories. And there was more. Like there was one dream or one segment of the hypnosis where I said, "Well, it's nighttime, and I'm in my bed getting ready to go to sleep, but my whole bedroom is full of light, and I know it's nighttime. It's not supposed to be light in here, but the light was coming through the window from a craft." And then there were other things that, you know, are kind of disturbing. I don't really want to go into at the moment, but
Sure.
there's just things happened all the time, and I think that it went on happening all the way through adolescence. And it's you know, it's very strange stuff, and it was scary, but after a while it got to the point where I didn't feel afraid of them anymore. I was kind of disturbed by contact with them, but not really afraid anymore, because obviously I was waking up in the morning, I still had 5 10 fingers and 10 toes, and
Right.
you know, I had it seemed like it was okay. So whatever they were doing, it didn't seem to be harming me in any way. It's worth mentioning a synchronicity here that when Eisenhower met with extraterrestrials in I think it was 1954, and then also Majestic 12 met with a different group of extraterrestrials, there was an agreement made at that time that human beings, children and adult human beings could be picked up according to a treaty that these negative ETs had with our government, because they wanted to pick us up and do experiments on us and figure out what made us tick and you know, doing other things to us. But that happened right at the time that I was born. That agreement happened right when I was born, and I think that I was definitely part of it. And another really interesting book to read for other experiencers out there is Dan Sherman's Above Black, Project Preserve Destiny. Really good book. It's about his experiences when he was in the military, getting tapped because of special. See, the government follows you if you're an ET abductee. The government follows what's going on with you and the ETs because they want to know why they picked you and not some other kid or not some other person. Why did they pick that person? You know, so when people say that they hear military helicopters after an extraterrestrial visitation, these people, they're following this around to try to figure it out. So Dan Sherman was a intuitive communicator, and he would get a telepathic connection with an ET who had been abducting a person, and he would be given words and numbers that he was then supposed to enter on a computer screen, and then press enter, and those words or numbers would go flying off to someplace, and he never knew where because he was just like a middleman. Take in the information, enter in the computer, and off it goes someplace.
Okay.
And so they follow you. You know, I think that they must have known I was kind of a different kid, a kind of a spiritual kid. Just to
Hmm.
give you an idea how different I was. I think my second or third grade
Mm.
teacher sat me down one day and said, you know, you don't seem to have a lot of friends in school. You just kind of go off by yourself and do your own thing. And I said, that's not true. I said, I have plenty of friends. I have birds and animals and trees, and, you know, they're all my friends, and I'm not lonely at all, you know. And I barely missed a trip to the school counselor's office, I think, on one. But he just didn't understand, you know. To me, the Native American philosophy that everything has a living spirit was very alive in me as a child. To me, it was all alive and all special and all wonderful.
I can vouch for what you're talking about as far as the people from the deep state following people around who they suspect who've had these experiences. I remember, I think about a year before I first learned about you. I was on a block of the Richard Dolan show, and when we finished our interview, I left after like 3 hours. I left the program, and I could hear the unmistakable vibration and sound of probably Chinook. I didn't see the helicopters, but they were flying so low. I know they're not supposed to fly over residential areas at below a certain altitude. So I can vouch. I can definitely vouch for what you're saying.
Hmm. Yeah, and when my daughter was young and I was living in Las Vegas, Nevada, we would regularly hear helicopters over our house. It was pretty freaky. So
Yeah.
anyway, so my early childhood, I was having experiences. I was having experiences all the way through adolescence and young adulthood. Um, and then I went into the military and, you know, had my experiences there, got out of the military, and was married at the time, had 2 kids by that time. And I just, you know, I would get stressed about things. A lot of times I thought the stress was just because of being married to an alcoholic like my dad, you know,
Oh.
and so on and so forth. But then I got out of that marriage and I got involved with a guy who was really a pretty good guy, not a drinker. He was a parole and probation officer in Las Vegas. And we had a really good relationship. And yet, all my angst and my stress and my anxiety and my emotional imbalance was still there. And I thought, what is going on here? I'm in the best relationship I've ever been in my life with someone I love very much who loves me. We have a wonderful time together. Where is all this crap coming from? Because it's making us miserable. You know, it's making me miserable, and I know I'm making the people I care about miserable. And I nearly committed suicide. And it was
Man.
only uh, an out of body experience I had in my early 20s that stopped me from that suicide, because I realized that I wasn't this thing here and I was going to go someplace, and I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good if I took
Right.
myself to suicide. So I committed to healing no matter where I had to look, no matter what I had to do. I committed to healing at that point on that day. And that's when I started following the synchronicities that led me to find out about 3 months of missing time in the military. I had a friend who sat me down one afternoon because he noticed I didn't talk about my military time, and whenever he would bring it up, I'd change the subject. He sat me down and says, "Can you tell me about your military time? Is that a problem?" I said, "No, it's not a problem. I can tell you everything." "Well, tell me about it chronologically from when you went in to when you got out." And so I started telling him, well, I went in at Cleveland, Ohio, in the AFES station there, and then I was at Lackland Air Force Base for for boot camp. And
Been there too, by the way. Good, nice,
yeah,
nice base. Wonderful
yeah,
place to be stationed. Love San
uh,
Antonio.
yeah. And then went to Biloxi, Mississippi, to Keesler Air Force Base for technical training school, and was there for a few months learning how to run and operate radar and do maintenance on it and stuff like that. And then I went home for a period of time on leave to be with my mom and my daughter because I got in the Air Force program when they had a program for single parents. So yeah, so then I went to, then my daughter and I traveled out to Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, where Nellis Air Force Base is. And I went there, I had base orientation. I remember a few things about the orientation there. And then I went up to Tonopah, and I remember a few things and one or two people that I would talk to on the bus, but nothing else was there. And I looked at my friend that had asked me the questions, and I said, I don't know, I don't remember anything about working at Tonopah, and I was there for at least 3 months. And
Wow.
this is freaking me out, and I feel sick to my stomach. And
So, at what point after when you arrived at Nellis, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Nellis Air Force Base, basically, I just want to paint this picture for the
mhm.
listeners, if you don't mind. Yeah, Nellis is north of Las Vegas, and then you have Nellis is like a collection of small bases and testing ranges, including Groom Lake. Is that correct?
Sort of. I think about it a little differently, and I'm not saying that the way I think about it is differently, but having been there, I do know this. Nellis Air Force Base is a base of itself. There's an annex area out Highway 15, I think, to the north, where you go to Grand Canyon through that area. Then if you take the other road north, and I can't think of the number of it right now, you go, it kind of heads up Nevada. There's the Nevada test site, which is where Area 51, S4, Groom Lake is. And then there's other facilities out there as well. That's not the only thing going on out there, because later on in life, I worked at SAIC, Science Applications International Corporation, and I worked out there on the Yucca Mountain project, which they were doing studies on Yucca Mountain, which is basically a big ash flow volcanic drift.
Wow,
The
that's neat.
like a volcano's way over here, and when it erupted in prehistoric times, the ash would blow this way, and then it formed up layers and layers and layers of this big ash flow drift that then over time hardened into rock. And
Wow, that's got to be something to see too. That's gonna be a quiet
yeah,
thing to see.
it's pretty cool. So I've been
Yeah,
up on the mountain a few times, and I got to tell you, from a Native American point of view, that's a very angry mountain. It does not like
really.
what's done to it. Yeah, I
Wow,
actually brought stones home from the top of Yucca Mountain, and I had to take them back and put them back up there. I couldn't have them in the house.
wow.
So anyway, so that's where I was working with SEIC. This is later on, but to go back to the military, you know, I was just really freaked out at not being able to remember 3 months of my life, because I have pretty good memory of my life, you know, up to that point, and scared the crap out of me. And so later on in 1994, I volunteered as a volunteer for the Whole Life Expo that was going on at one of the casinos in Las Vegas. And I met a whole bunch of people there. I met Alex Collier, which if you haven't followed Alex Collier, you should, because that guy is a contactee. And when he talks, he's talking about real contact with extraterrestrials, not during the dream state, not where whatever. They just picked him up starting in childhood and gave him all kinds of information. He's a direct contactee of the Andromedans. Very amazing man. Very, very amazing man. And so I saw him there, and then I saw Bud Hopkins, who really made a name for himself as a person who did hypnosis on experiencers and abductees and got their stories out. So he was giving a talk at this Whole Life Expo, and at the end of his talk, I raised my hand and I said, well, I have these weird dreams from childhood, this weird dream of being left alone under a street lamp in childhood, and then this other strange dream. And then I just found out recently that I can't remember 3 months of my time in the Air Force. And he said, he stopped me at that point. He says, talk to me after we're done here. So I did that. Long story short, he did a hypnosis session on me that night, and a whole lot of questions began to get answered, and they were really terrifying. They were
I
terrifying.
I can
Yeah,
only imagine.
yeah,
So you were in Vegas and you met the legendary Bud Hopkins and this other gentleman, Alex Collier.
yeah.
I just pulled some information up about him. Tracking Andromeda, or I think that's what I'm seeing here. Definitely going to have to check that out. But moving forward, so Bud Hopkins, well, I feel personally like we owe a lot to him. Like he did some of the most revolutionary, groundbreaking research into this phenomenon. I think he started because I know he was an artist, and he had like I think two UFO encounters
Mhm,
previously to getting into this, and he even said at a point I heard him say one time that he actually inspired when he had those encounters. It actually changed his art style of art almost. Also, it's pretty interesting.
uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, so you met Bud Hopkins, and you went under. You told him about your 3 months of
Mhm.
missing time and some of these other things, and um, what happened?
What happened? Well, he started out by saying, "Okay, it's January of 1980, and it's nighttime, and please tell me where you are." And I said, "I'm standing on the deck of the radar van, and I'm looking in the sky because there's saucers floating up there,
That's creepy.
flying saucers." And he says, "Well, tell me more about what's going on." He didn't lead me. He didn't say, "Were you doing this?" And I would say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, that was it." He would just ask questions and I'd answer them. He did not lead me. That's one of the
Sure.
things that a lot of people against hypnosis say, "Oh, you were led, you have implanted memories and everything." Well, I'm not saying memories can never be implanted, but I don't, when I listen to my transcripts, I don't hear anybody leading me anywhere. Okay, so anyway, he said, "Tell me what's happening." I said, "Well, we were just doing a test of our radar in the radar van, and then we were told to stand out here. Me and two other guys were standing on the deck of radar fan, forbidden to talk to each other, and threatened if we did talk to each other. And we're looking at these saucers up there, and I can't say for sure how many were up there, but there was several, and we had been trying to track them with the auto track radar. Auto track radar is a targeting radar. It's not a big sweep the sky radar. It's a targeting radar. So if we tracked an aircraft with it for 5 minutes, it was considered a kill. But we couldn't track these things. They could not be tracked.
How
It's
fast
like,
were they going? If you had to take a wild guess, how fast do you think these objects were traveling?
I think that they were doing a pulse of faster than light travel for like maybe 1 second or maybe a fraction of a second, just long enough to disappear from our radar scope and reappear someplace else.
Wow. That math that that's very interesting you said that. What I remember, me and my colleague Greg Ship, years ago, I think I want to say it was like 2015 or 2016, something like that. During that summer, this one summer back in sometime in that era, I was having UFO sightings almost every single night for about 2.5 months one summer. And the object that I was seeing the most frequently, um, it would go like that, and then it would kind of implode, and then it would reappear on the horizon or in another area of space. Very
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So that was that. And then he says, "Okay, well, what's happening after that?" And I said, "Well, they're putting us in a vehicle and taking us someplace. And we got out of the vehicle at what I thought was Area 51. And we were taken into something that looked like an old military medical dispensary. And it had chairs uh, that I drew pictures of and remembered really well that were waiting room chairs. And me and maybe 12 other people, not sure how many, because the lights were off in the room. Everything they could do to help mask anything we would see to aid in not remembering, they did. So we were all sat down in a waiting room in these chairs with black vinyl back and seat. and the lights were off in the room. Again, we were forbidden to speak to each other, and we were threatened with guns about that, not speaking to each other. And one by one, they call us and we go in this little side room. When it was my turn to go in that little side room, I was told to lay down on a stainless steel examining table that looked like a piece of equipment from maybe the 1950s or 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And I laid down there, and there was an armed security guard watching me in the room, standing at parade rest with a sidearm, and was wearing desert camouflage fatigues. And then finally, I was waiting and waiting and waiting there, wondering what was going to happen next, terrified. And then a guy in a white lab coat came through the same door I entered that room through, saying, "Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm," a real monotone voice. And then he walked past the security guard at the foot of the table, up alongside the right side of the table. And when he got to beside my head, brought his hand up in one smooth move and injected me in the side of the neck with a needle. And I went immediately into shock. And during the hypnosis with Bud Hopkins, I came out of the hypnosis at that point and sat straight up. And I was scared, and I said, "What the hell?" And Bud said, "I do hear about these kinds of experiences with the military from time to time." He says, "I don't put them in my books on purpose because I want the military to stay out of my business."
Stop right there for one moment, Niara.
Yeah,
So when you were laying on this slab or this table or whatever it was,
the table,
uh,
table.
a man in a laboratory type garment came in and checked you. Is it in your neck, correct?
Right in the
Yeah.
neck here.
Um.
Chemical
wh-
went straight to the brain, and it put me immediately into shock.
Wow. Um. This is a good point. I think we need to take a break. Let's go ahead and take a break here. But when we come back, I want to hear. I want to hear about what happened. I want our listeners to hear what happened, and I want to talk about some more also. And after that, I also want to talk about your website, your book, and things you're working on right now related to this.
Well, I know, just before we take off here, I know what happened after the shot, because later on in 2003, I had more hypnosis, two very long, extensive sessions where I found out what happened after the shot and other things that happened and things that happened with ETs.
Okay,
So I learned
awesome.
more. Yeah.
So when we come back, we'll talk about that. And this is Project Stargate. You're listening to Niara Isley, the Missing Time, and we'll be right back.